I'm Captain Logan, and welcome once again to the vast and ominous Comic Vault. Today I'm going to talk about one of the oldest comics that I have ever reviewed here on the Vault. I think this is second only to when I reviewed Batman #1, which of course was 1939. This is a story published originally in 1946, although what I'm looking at is a reprint from 1967. This is Fantasy Masterpieces, number 10. This is a book that I was not aware that Marvel published, and of course this was early on in the Marvel run post-Timely. This is, well, the first few years anyway, and basically what happened was, in at least as far as I can tell in my estimation, Stan Lee and his crew were looking at the characters that were getting really popular that they had brought back from the Golden Age and decided, why don't we bring back some of those stories and reprint them? And now that these characters are popular again, and some of them maybe more popular even than they had been in the first place, probably Namor is one of those, I would assume. They decided, let's go ahead and try to capitalize on some of those old stories. And so this is, as I said, a series that reprints stories that Stan Lee here at the top is calling the Golden Age of Marvel. And it is indeed, of course, the Golden Age of comics in general. And by the time this was published, we were in, of course, the Silver Age. This is fascinating for a couple of different reasons. One of them is that we're in what we now consider the Silver Age, and already on a comic book calling stuff from this period the Golden Age. I had no idea anybody was doing that, and there's a lot of things like that in this where I'm like, things that I didn't know were happening yet. Really interesting. The other reason that I think that's significant, especially here, this is somewhat of a coincidence, but it's interesting just looking at this as a piece, as a kind of a relic, is this is a story, kind of an oversized, I guess it's like 43, 46 pages before you get to a couple little backup features at the end, which I'll briefly talk about a little bit later. This is a long story in several chapters featuring each of the separate characters in this team called the All-Winter Squad, and each of them have to go off and foil a minor plot in a larger caper, each based on one of the ages of man. What we have is a story about the ages of history in a Silver Age comic going back to the Golden Age. I think this is really interesting. So it's a story about history, and it's a story that also, or at least in this reprinted form, it's Marvel trying to preserve its own history. I think that's really interesting. The characters that are featured here, about half of them are characters that were brought back and retooled a little bit, and in Human Torch's case, of course, famously a lot, in the Marvel Universe post-Timely. And then the others are characters that were kind of long forgotten. We have Miss America here. We have a character called the Wizard, who is a guy who, of course, can run really fast. He's got a yellow costume like Kid Flash, and also, interestingly, is called verbatim, his tagline, the fastest man alive. I was really surprised to see that in 1946 with a character that's not the Flash. And I'm not sure when Flash being called the fastest man alive originated. I would not be surprised to find that predates this, but that's the thing I'm not real sure about. Anyway, this is a story written by Bill Finger. I had to look this up because it's not credited here, and that was common for comics of this period. It's a thing that could have been added, and I'm a little surprised that it wasn't. This is reprinted, as far as I can tell, exactly the way it was originally, so again, that's preserved, but I'm a little bit surprised that nowhere, like in the publication stuff at the bottom, or in like an extra page or something, do we get credits, because that's a big thing, famously, of course, that Stan Lee added with Marvel. What we have here is a team of superheroes, All-Winter Squad. I had heard of them, never knew what they were, had no idea that these pre-Marvel Marvel characters were involved. Captain America, Human Torch, and Namor, the Submariner, are the big ones. And we have kind of what feels like an intercontinuity thing even pre-Marvel, where you have these characters, some of which had their own books. I know Captain America had comics outside of this even before you had Marvel's Captain America. And so you know, we think of the shared universe as a relatively new invention, but of course it's not. I mean, you know, with DC, Batman and Superman had adventures together going way back, and the same was true of a lot of these characters. And what I was a little bit surprised by reading this is how a lot of the character traits are kind of preserved with some of these guys. I guess that's the word of the day today. That a lot of the character traits that we're familiar with some of these characters seem to be intact, and they won't really changed all that much when they were brought in for the for Stan Lee's Marvel Universe. Captain America seems not the not the smartest, the sharpest tool in the shed sometimes, but some of that seems to be just a case of dumbing down things for the novelty of a kind of throwaway, action-packed story that has kind of a quick moral that it hits you over the head with at the end, but that mostly is just about these characters running around stopping crimes and the very typical superhero stuff of the time. Captain America absolutely cracks me up all over this book. The All-Winter Squad gets a message from this new villain called Isbissa or Icebisa, Bisa, you can pronounce it a whole bunch of different ways, and Captain America, and it, of course, at first you look at it and you're like, that's a really stupid sounding name for a supervillain. Here's a guy that I guarantee you will not end up being adapted for one of the Marvel Cinematic movies. This is where they will draw the line. I'm sure Icebisa will not be a major bad guy in a Captain America movie. This is a very one-and-done kind of villain. He's trying to, we find out by the end, we don't know what his motives are until we get to the end. He's just kind of and he's still even at the end, he's just kind of a mustache-twirling villain. They spell out, Bill Finger spells out his villain laugh a lot, ha 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 ha, and he likes to talk about himself in the third person. And this is a guy who we're at the tail end right after World War II, and so we've got a guy right after Hitler who is wanting to be the next big world dictator, and that's his whole motivation. And the whole idea with the ages, by the way, when you get, I guess I'll just throw this out there now, when you get to the end, the idea is here's all of history, we need to make sure that we learn from it. So there's a mystery about his name. What does Icebisa stand for? And it turns out that each of the letters, this is creating an acronym for each of the ages of man. And when you get to the last one, A stands for the atomic age, which is supposed to, of course, represent the future in the perspective of these people working on a book in 1946. And the big message that Captain America touts up at the end is he says we've had enough dictators, the future belongs to everyone, and the atomic the atomic bomb, the ability to split the atom, needs to be used for the good of mankind. So, of course, what we're doing here is we're kind of fishing around trying to figure out what we're going to do with the future now that World War II is finishing up. Because before this, of course, a lot of superhero comics were let's go fight the clear, obvious enemy. We have a real-life supervillain. Let's go punch him in the face in every comic book. And what do you do after that? I think it's really interesting that this story is kind of about that a little bit. It's about the future. It's about where do we go from here. And I like the idea of doing a story where a guy wants to be the next hit. The optimistic message is we need to learn from our mistakes, but also inevitably good will prevail. And that's, whether that's true or not, it's kind of the message that these kind of stories try to tout up. And even the couple of Yeah, because it's interesting, there's like 20 years in between. The couple of backup features at the end of this, which are reprinted things from the early 60s, are both stories that are not superhero stories. One of them is a heist thing, and the other one is a kind of O. Henry sci-fi, almost Twilight Zone kind of thing. This would have been when Twilight Zone was really popular. It's a robot story. Both of them have the same kind of good always prevails. The bad guy gets poetic justice at the end, and the bad guy in a lot of these little individual tales inside of this Ice Bisa story have kind of poetic justice endings to them. Like there's one guy who turns people into stone, and he trips on a rock at the end and kind of falls to his doom. And so the story makes, again, spells everything out. Lots and lots of narration throughout, feeling the need to tell you things that you can see in the story. Very, very melodramatic, a whole lot of exclamation points, trying to keep you engaged and excited and interested. And that's one of those places where it feels the need to spell out, he slipped on a rock. Isn't that ironic? Isn't that poetic justice? So anyway, as I said, each of the little individual stories are kind of following a character. Most of the time, not really doing a lot of character development or character progression. We're in that period where superhero comics were a lot more about the good guy always wins. He goes off. He stops the villain. Bully for him, the end. And but there are hints and flashes here and there of some real humanity, or at least kind of a real human trait, or something that somebody learns. I guess the closest thing to a real character arc anybody gets is Namor. In his story, he has been kind of run off, or rather he's run himself off from the All-Winter Squad because Ice Bisa puts in, what a goofy name, Ice Bisa puts in his notes to the squad that he puts in, I forget the context, but he puts in the word Roman. And as I said, Captain America is really funny in this. And one of the things that he does, I would call Captain America in this the world's worst detective. He's looking at this and he says, Ice Bisa, maybe it spells something if you spell it backwards. So he spells Ice Bisa backwards, and he goes, oh, that doesn't mean anything. And then he sees the word Roman, and he goes, oh, well, you know what? I bet the word Roman spells nothing backwards. And then he spells it backwards, and it spells Namor. And so then Captain America goes, oh, man, Namor must be part of this plot. And nobody trusts Namor. Again, this is a thing that is a lot like the Marvel Universe, where Namor is kind of is kind of this conflicted hero who jumps back and forth, and he cares a lot more about, in that, of course, nothing's talked about really about Atlantis here, but he does things in the ocean, and he's able to control whales and stuff. But, that's about it. But of course, the regular Marvel, if you're not familiar with Namor, he's Prince of Atlantis, and he cares a lot more about his own civilization than he does about ours. And those two things come into conflict a whole lot, and he doesn't trust us. So a lot of the time he'll go up against humanity and he'll be a villain, but he's not a villain in the sense that he hates everyone and that he's evil and that he wants to rule the world. He just cares a lot more about his people than he does about ours. Well, in this, people have kind of this generic distrust of Namor, and in this particular story, because I don't know if that's played with a lot in other stories, because I haven't read any more All-Winter Squad, but I get the sense that that's kind of a motif with this character, and the big thing, of course, is that he's still a hothead, and he calls himself that, and there's this kind of ironic thing. Bill Finger is trying to play a lot with irony and powers, and characters having powers that either reflect their own personalities, or more often end up being reflections of somebody else's. So Namor is going off with the Human Torch's kid's sidekick Toro. I did not know that Human Torch had a kid sidekick, but this is kind of infamously the period where everybody's got a kid sidekick, because the kids have to have somebody to relate to. I didn't realize that there was this kid that could also flame on like the Human Torch. By the way, the flame on, flame off thing is here. The narration says that, and then he uses that terminology. That was a thing I was very surprised by. That's not Stan Lee. That's here. And Toro goes off with Human Torch, and the whole time, or Human Torch, with Namor, and the whole time, this kid's sidekick, he's, really naive and optimistic, but that benefits him, and it benefits Namor, because the whole time they're going off to stop this, they go for the Ice Age plot. Of course, you got to have the fire guy dealing with the Ice Age, and they go off to, I guess that's kind of fun. The water guy and the fire guy go off to deal with the Ice Age plot, and they're dealing with some whalers that are in a heist. But most of this is people trying to steal stuff, and real simple, basic plots. But it's okay. It works for the most part, because Ice Bisa is just trying to send off each of these guys on a smaller mission to try to keep them from, debate them so that they won't know about his bigger, larger plot to try to be the dictator of the world. So anyway, you've got, as I was saying, you've got Namor and Toro, and Toro trusts Namor. He's the only one that does, and thinks that he's telling the truth and that he doesn't have anything to do with Ice Spice's plot. And it's just so obvious that he doesn't. And then, but Namor doesn't trust him. So the closest thing to a character arc in this whole thing is you get to the end of that, and they work well together, and Namor realizes that this is a kid he can trust, and he says, "I'm sorry, I'm a hothead." And it's kind of fun that he says that to the fire guy. Like, he's the hothead, but he's dealing with a fire guy who's got his head on straight and is not letting, emotion and circumstance and stuff get the better of him, and he's giving people the benefit of the doubt. So I thought that was kind of cool. As I said, Captain America, world's worst detective. He can't tell right away that, and of course this is comic book melodrama. It very much reads like kiddie fiction, even for this time, I think. But it's still really funny to me that you get to the end of this and Captain America's like, "Oh man, I should have known. Ice Bisa set us all off on these different capers to solve, and it turned out that none of them were the main one, and that this guy was trying to do this other thing all along." Isn't that really obvious? Like, he gives each of them a card to tell each of them specifically to go to this place. He gives them clues and splits them all off, and then he's nowhere to be found. Gee, I wonder what's going to happen. And then they beat him at the end in like 3 pages. It's really funny. The way folks perceived women at the time, this is really typical in that way. There's this, one of the stories, I forget which, I think it's the one with, is it the one with the Whizzer, or is it the one with Human Torch? I forget. But there's one where there's this female cop, and the hero is so unfamiliar with this, she has to spell out for him that there is such a thing as a female copper, and that she has a fiancé that wants to get married, but won't get married to her until she quits the force. And just really typical traditional stuff, of course. And she says she doesn't have like a real woman's lib thing. It's more just like she has this personal pride. So she says she has to solve one big case, and then she'll give that up forever and go marry this guy. And she helps the hero out, and then at the end he says, "Now you can go get married," and that's apparently what she does. So this really obviously, of course, a patriarchal view. I was a little bit surprised just how typical it was, considering that I oftentimes will hear just how typical that view is in a lot of stories from this period, and then I'll read things, and it's not always that way. A lot of the time, I'll read things that are kind of pushing against that. This, not so much. You've got the same sort of thing. Oh, and it's also really funny that she throws her shoes in a spinning fan, and oh, that is the Human Torch one, because she's got to throw her shoes into the fan so that it won't blow out Human Torch's fire, which I thought was hilarious. And it read to me a little bit like, see, this is why it's important that women, like, keep in their traditional gender role and stay domesticated, because if she had been wearing a different kind of shoe, so I don't know, it's pretty funny. And it also reminded me a lot of American Made. But, well, she didn't, but the shoe thing, because, of course, American Made is a character that's very liberated, but looks like a housewife. Anyway, I digress. So, you've got that, and then you also have Miss America, who is... Her kind of tagline is America's girlfriend. So again, it tells you kind of what time we're living in. And there's a part where people think she's dead, and they're almost dismissive about it. Where it's like, it's so sad that she's gone. She was a great little hero. Like they use the word little. It's almost. And I mean, like, I'm not reviewing this as like somebody from contemporary times saying, how dare this be such a male-centric society, and look at people like that. It's just really interesting that it's like, we've got to have female superheroes, but we have to make sure that we're conforming to the kind of general worldview and ideals of the traditional culture that we're living in. So she can be there and we can have that, but we have to use terms like little and that kind of thing. But anyway, that's about everything I think I wanted to mention about that whole thing. As I said, there are a couple of and I also meant to mention, by the way, sorry, that Ice Bisa at the end gets unmasked in a very, very Scooby-Doo moment that made me wonder just how often you get an ending like that in this, where they unmask him, and it's the Muslim's director's secretary, and he's got that, and I would have gotten away with it too kind of line, and it's just absolutely hilarious. And then at the end, there are a couple of backup features, one of them written by Larry Lieber, and written and drawn by Larry Lieber, I think, but with art that reminds me a lot of some Steve Ditko stuff, especially when he draws old people. And then the other one, I'm sorry, I gotta look real quick because I don't remember, because of course these are stories written later, so even though they're reprinted, they're only a few years old at this point, so they actually do have some they actually do have credits. But anyway, the first one is called There Were Five Frightened Men, and it's about these are really short stories, and again, these are very pulpish, kind of in that tradition. This is a heist story, kind of a but with a horror tinge to it, where you've got this guy who steals a painting, and he's this rich guy that nobody knows is stealing things. They make a big deal out of sometimes things aren't as they appear, and which is interesting now that I think about it because of how it ends. That's actually really cool because his book ended like that. So it says people aren't always the way they appear. This guy doesn't seem like a crook because he's rich, and then he goes and tries to steal his painting, and the guy who owns the painting warns him, don't take that painting, and it turns out that it's for his own good, and the guy does it anyway, and he was warned, and the painting turns out to be cursed, and it sucks him into it, and he has to live out the rest of his days trapped in this painting. And so once again, things are not always as they seem. So I don't know, that's kind of neat. The second one I didn't like quite as well. That as just kind of a quick morality tale was pretty good. The second one it's another be careful what you wish for kind of thing, or more, as I said, like you, kind of a poetic justice thing where there's this guy who is in love with this girl and she's not into him. So he says, if I can't have you, no one can. And he decides to get his revenge on her by murdering her. And he decides to do it. He says, I've got the perfect crime. This is so ludicrous. He's like, my perfect crime is I'm going to, you know what? Once again, I don't think I ever figured out who wrote that one. This is, oh, you know what? This one does not have credits. It doesn't look like. Weird, because this is a journey in a mystery story. I expected it would. Okay, I don't know who's responsible for this. I don't know who's responsible for this story. Anyway, it was in Journey to Mystery, and it in '62, and the issue number was 77. And what it's called, Beware He Isn't Human. And so this guy has the perfect crime, right? He is a makeup artist for horror movies, and he's like a creature creator, and he says, I'm going to build a robot to kill this girl, and nobody will ever be able to trace it back to me because the man that I made is a handsome guy, and I make monsters and creatures, so nobody can ever trace it back to me, right? Because nobody would think that one of the people that might have done this is this guy, especially if anybody knew about it, because this is a guy with a motive, right? Nobody would ever suspect that it's the guy who creates monsters for movies who built a robot to kill a girl who didn't like him and didn't want anything to do with him. Anyway, so, but this is where it gets really silly, and the O. Henry ending comes out of nowhere, and it's the kind of Twilight Zone ending that doesn't work because it's out of left field and it's not paying off anything. So you get to the end and it pretends like it's paying a thing off, but it's not. So at the beginning, the girl says that she's waiting for someone else. And the big oh wow moment is supposed to be that what she has been waiting for is a robot herself, and that he actually builds her. So once again, kind of poetic justice. He builds her what she was waiting for in order to kill her, and they've got this really weird, twisted version of the laws of robotics where these robots, especially apparently they're all the same even though they're made by different people, these robots will not harm each other but can kill humans because the humans aren't robots and they don't like them. Okay, and nothing weird that there'd be nothing in the programming to stop that from happening since humans made them both. So you get to the end, and she's like, "Oh, thank you. You built the guy that I've been waiting for, and now we're gonna get you." And that's how that one ends. So anyway, it is remarkable sometimes looking back on old comics just how much bang you get for your buck, or for a quarter of your buck, because this was a 25-cent comic book. By the way, my mother gave me this for my birthday, so thanks a lot, Mom. She found this at a I haven't gotten to visit it, but she found this at a really neat little comic book store in Central Arkansas, and she bought me a few comics for my birthday. This was one of them, and thanks, Mom. I had no idea that this existed and that Marvel was reprinting things from their golden age, and I learned a lot reading this, and I really enjoyed this, and wanted to make this fall, as I do with a lot of stuff, kind of as informative of a thing as actually reviewing it, because this is a thing that I'm sure a lot of you haven't read and probably will not end up reading. So there you go. There's some stuff about Fantasy Masterpieces number 10, reprinting All Winter Squad number 19, as well as some other things. So anyway, thanks a lot for watching, and if you'd ever like to send anything to be reviewed on the Comic Vault, you can send us packages at the P.O. Box that's there on your screen. I'll be back with you again very soon with more Comic Vaults, and thanks again. Sure appreciate you watching. I'm Captain Logan. Happy reading.